Should grandparents have a legal right to see their grandchildren? Get your calls coming in. The number is 0207 862 2222. Now, two grandparents have sparked the conversation after saying that being prevented from seeing their grandchildren last year was like a living bereavement. They've signed a petition calling for grandparents to have a legal right to continue to see their grandkids, which has been backed by support groups around the country. One of the examples used is when parents of children divorce. It's often the case that lawyers help decide how parenting split. But currently, it's not a legal requirement to allow grandparents to continue to see those grandchildren. Emily, we were just talking in the break about how much we loved our grandparents. Do you think it should be? Do we think grandparents should be legally allowed?
I think this is a very, very tricky subject because emotionally, I would say, yes, of course, grandparents should have a legal right to see their grandchildren. Having said that, the way the law is framed at the moment, the rights of the child is paramount. And there are situations, and normally when we talk about grandparents not seeing their grandchildren, it's either because the grandparents have fallen out with their own children or the parents, their children have split up and then there's issues over custody and access and the grandparents desperately get caught in the middle. But there have been cases that I have heard of, you know, instances of domestic abuse where some, not always, but a father has been banned from seeing his children because of domestic abuse. And then the grandparents have been granted rights to see, access by the mother to see their, you know, the paternal grandparents. And that's been a backdoor for which the father has been able to see. So the current legal framework is that the right of the child should be absolutely paramount. And when, you know, the initial stage is mediation for parents and grandparents, and then obviously if a court has to decide on access, a judge will take into consideration, first of all, everybody's wishes, but paramount is the interest of the child. I would just say there are lots of, if anyone's affected by this, there are lots of charities out there that do help. There's a charity that I have done some work with, the Family Rights Group, which is very, very good. If anyone needs any advice about kinship or care or access, then Family Rights Group, please do go and look.
Good advice, actually. I mean, there are legal redress you can go to. There are legal routes, but it can get quite complicated. And, you know, in an ideal world, Darren, you know, breakups would be, you know, amenable about grandparents, and because it's important for the children. I mean,
Absolutely.
It is important for the children to keep in touch with their grandchildren.
It is. My nan, I mean, she's watching now. She's like the greatest person
Give her a wave, go on,
I've
give
ever...
her a wave.
Hi, Nan! She's at home watching.
Bet she's so proud.
What's her name?
Joan. Joan, hello!
Hi, Joan.
She's great. I couldn't imagine my life without her. But I was thinking about my mum and my uncles and aunties. They never had grandparents at all. They grew up without any grandparents. And it's hard to get my head around to grow up without that. And I know how important it is for us to see my nan, even though when we get there, after about an hour, she wants everybody out the house. She's had enough of everybody.
She's like, no, I've started enough of the cooking, enough of that, come on.
Cooking, clean, too much noise, get out. But yeah, I agree with you 100% on what you said. Once we start legal right, it makes it...
It's the legislation around it, isn't it? In an ideal world, everyone sit around the table and discuss, right, OK, the relationship, our marriage is broken down, but it's still important for little Johnny to see his grandchildren, his grandparent. But, I mean, it's not that simple, so...
No, and I think maybe there should be more, well, like we're doing now, talking about it. I think there should be more recognition, perhaps, from the state even, in terms of the role that grandparents do play. I mean, there's the kind of, obviously, there's the supportive role in terms of the role modelling, hopefully, and the, you know, that lovely stat that 92% in a survey, 92% of grandparents say that they feel young at heart because they spend time with their grandchildren. But also, I mean, I would like to see the state maybe have, you know, better tax breaks for those, you know, retired grandparents who then act as carers for their young grandchildren. Look, it's a huge undertaking. I mean, I've got young children. I mean, goodness me. I mean, you know, it is a lot of hard work, particularly when, you know, you're retired in your 60s and your 70s. But I think perhaps if the state can recognise the role of grandparents more, then there is that kind of recognition. I mean, look, it takes a village to raise a child, and grandparents have a huge role in all of that.
Also, sometimes it's not that easy because because grandparents, a lot of them aren't that mobile. So you have to make sure you are free to go there with the kids to see them. And I think for some families, it's quite hard.
Well, and evidently 1 in 4 parents say they would have to give up work if it wasn't for the care, the childcare, their grandparents could survive. Right, let's go to some of the callers now. Linda in Norfolk. Good afternoon, Linda. What would you like to say?
Good afternoon. I've got 4 grandsons. 2 of them I used to see when I lived in Kent. I had to move up to Norwich because I'm partially sighted and I needed eye treatment at the Norfolk Norwich, which is a very good eye hospital. My daughter hasn't spoken to me for 5 years. I have no idea why.
Sorry.
She lives 14 miles away from me. In that time, she's got a husband and 2 grandsons, and I haven't seen any of them. It's very, very expensive for grandparents to assert their rights to see their grandchildren.
Yeah.
And I just would appreciate if anybody's got any ideas.
Linda, that must be incredibly upsetting, and obviously we don't know what's happened between you and your daughter, but if your daughter has 2 sons, could you communicate with your daughter and say, I am going to send them letters, and you can write them cards and write them letters. Do you have your...
got their address. She won't even give me her address.
But Linda, as Emily was saying earlier on, there are charities that can help you out with that. So maybe...
Yes, there's a charity. There's lots of, if you type in sort of, help for grandparent access online, or there's a charity that I've done work with, Family Rights Group, which will maybe help to, give you some ideas for mediation, or even just some ideas to trying to repair whatever's happened with your daughter.
Thank you so much for your call, Linda, and hopefully good luck. Hope you get some redress in this one. Let's go to Billy in South Ayrshire. Good afternoon, Billy. What would you like to say?
Good afternoon. I was practically raised by my grandparents growing up because both my mum and dad worked full time, and they done a great job. Unfortunately, my grandfather's no longer with us, and my gran now has early onset dementia. But growing up, they done a fantastic job raising me to become the fantastic young man that I am. As the other caller said, I'm partially sighted myself, and my grandparents done a fantastic job raising me, even though I had my visual impairment and my other additional support needs.
Billy,
so, grandfather, if you happen to be watching in heaven, thank you very much for raising me. You've been a great papa. God bless you.
Oh, Billy, go on, give us a name check. What's the name?
John.
John.
And my grand's name's Jan.
John and Jan, well done for raising an excellent young man there. Billy, thank you so much for that call. I mean, Darren, it's, you talk about it quite a bit. You've had quite a difficult childhood yourself. So how important is that family unit? Is the grandparents involved when there is a troubled childhood?
Yeah, family unit it's so important. I always felt like everything was sort of centred around, especially my nan. She's such an important part of the family.
Yeah.
Everything is around the nan, and I honestly, my heart breaks for people who just don't have their grandparents in their life for whatever reason.
Yeah. I mean, I still have very happy memories. I mean, my mum and dad had to work full time, and sort of like, so nan and granddad did a lot of the childcare. I remember sitting around the kitchen table having syrup. They put syrup on everything, porridge, Yorkshire puddings, but it was such a lovely, happy memory. Let's go to some of our social media messages now. We've got Tracy on Twitter. Tracy says, I have never taken my grandson out alone, never pushed his buggy, never read him a bedtime story or had him over for a sleepover. It absolutely breaks my heart. I'm so sorry to hear that. That really must be, as like this, the story we're talking about, it's like a bereavement, isn't it? And Kerry says on Facebook, it would be nice to think so, but we do not own our children or our grandchildren. We have a responsibility to be grandparents, but not our grandparents, our grandchildren's parents. Alas, good intentions can lead to hell. Meanwhile, Melanie on Twitter says, just because a couple have split up, that should never interfere in the children's relationship with their grandparents on both sides of their families. It's just cruel and unnecessary to the kids and grandparents. Meanwhile, Luke on Twitter, good afternoon, Luke says, grandparents have every right, just like both parents, if they are separated. It is. I mean, there's some really, a few words there because there's social media messages, but behind those words, there's so much human emotion wrapped up in that relationship between a grandparent and a child, isn't there?
And actually, I think if whatever sort of family situation you're in, if you've fallen out, if the parents are split up or there've been, issues within the family between siblings, I do think that if you can't sort it out yourselves, and that sometimes can be very, very difficult. Look at the royal family. Then mediation is a really good route to go down, and there are free avenues of mediation, because often I think feeling heard, whatever the issue is, whatever the problem, feeling heard can often be the first step to trying to unravel. And at the end of the day, we are talking about children here, and their needs should always be put above whatever has happened between you and your partner, or you and your parent.
Because the other interesting thing here, we're talking about blood relatives most of the time here, but step families. I mean, sort of like, your child could marry someone and, for a while you are parents to those sort of like the children involved in that. Then suddenly that marriage fails, so they're gone from your life as well.
Horrible.
It's really...
Yeah, it's a lot to take in, especially for little kids.
Yeah. I mean, how do you explain it to the children? That's the thing. We're talking about the grandparents' emotions here. But, I mean, you've got young children.
Yeah.
I mean, how would you go about trying to get across that you can't see Nanny and Granddad
Well,
anymore?
exactly. And I think the paramount, you always have to try and remember that we are the adults and they are the children. So you always have to put the children first in that essence, in that moment, in that situation, because the children don't have any control. I mean, they're relying on you to literally take them to go and see their relatives and their family. And so I think that you have to try, and it's very difficult for us to regulate our emotions, but if we're going to teach our children emotional regulation, we have to start with ourselves and try and make sure that we treat everyone with kindness and put the children first.
But do you think, I mean, we've heard something from America, Darren, about children having legal rights to divorce their parents. So maybe children, when they get to a certain age, obviously not when they're very little, should be given more of a legal right themselves, not necessarily the grandparents, but the children given a legal right to how they can see their grandparents.
I don't know. I mean, what age are we talking? To be able to see their grandparent? I don't know. I just think legal right. I go with what Emily says about what I believe in the parents. I think there's parents' right. I trust them on who sees what. You never know. I just don't want kids. I don't know. I don't like the legal aspect of it.
It's legal.
It is.
Right, OK, we've been talking about helplines, and some of your calls and messages have been very emotional. There are helplines available. To find those and other information, you can go to channel5.com/helplines. OK, well, that's it for today. Thanks to Darren and Emily. Jeremy is back at 9:15 tomorrow. I'm back being Alexis again tomorrow. Have a wonderful afternoon. And as I said, Jeremy, we'll see you tomorrow morning. Enjoy your day.